Reflections with Marilyn Baker. Brought to you by Torch Trust, the Christian organisation with a vision for people with sight loss.
Hello and welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the show that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm Marilyn Baker and it's wonderful to have your company. With the summer of sport still with us here in the UK, we've a fascinating chat this week on Reflections with the CEO of Team Paralympic GB and the British Paralympic Association, the former blind England footballer Dave Clarke OBE, who captained sides during his 144 appearances for his country and also scored 128 goals. He's been entered into the English Football Hall of Fame for his achievements and is now the Chief Executive of the British Paralympic Association, which you might know as Paralympics GB, and we're grateful to him for spending time with us here on Reflections. He's chatting to Torch Trusts Sheila Armstrong ahead of the 2024 Paralympic Games.
Before we get into the 2024 Paralympics, let me ask you about your football career. It sounds amazing. 144 appearances, 128 goals, and you've captained sides too. That's quite an achievement for your country. I'm Scottish, but we'll let that go just now. you must feel very proud. I'm sure you absolutely, and you should do. Tell me about it.
Look, it was an absolutely amazing time. I think my career spanned from 1995 to 2012. It probably spanned the period in which Paralympic sport became much more built within the world-class system. But, let's face it, when I started, it was the best players in the country were being selected, but it wasn't supported by any formal body. And in fact, it wasn't until the year 2000 when the FA got involved, the English FA, and really started to support the team right through to 2012 when I retired. But to put on your shirt for your country is an amazing thing. To represent your country in European Championships, which I did on 8 times of 5 World Championships, 2 Paralympics. It was absolutely incredible. Yeah, just putting on that shirt, hearing the anthem, just being with your teammates and achieving something together. And I think, there's all sorts of highlights during that career, but I think the main one really is doing it together, doing it as a team. I may be fortunate enough to be the highest goal scorer in English football, which is a great accolade and something I'm very proud of. But what you've got to remember is every single one of those goals that I scored came from a pass from one of my teammates who created the opportunity. So great team sport, and I absolutely loved every minute of it.
Yeah. So you must have felt a great empathy or sympathy or whatever we like to say. I'm being Scottish. What did you make of the Euros this year? Yeah,
I think there are nearly 50 other teams who competed in the competition overall that would have loved to have been in England's position. I think the team, by their own admission, didn't play the most scintillating football, but that's not what tournament football's about. It's about getting the job done. It's not necessarily about entertaining, although that's a nice side benefit. But, they got top of their group. You can't do better than that. They got through the last 16, the last 8, and the last 4. And in the final, they played an incredibly strong Spanish team. I think there were opportunities to win it for England. I think, looking back on it, they might feel that, like the time before against Italy, that they might not have quite taken the handbrake off as much as they perhaps should. But that's a very talented Spain team. And if you do take the handbrake off and start attacking, you all of a sudden find people getting in behind you and causing you problems. So I think we can be super proud of what the England team achieved because, let's face it, they've got to 2 European finals, World Cup semi-finals, which is more successful than anyone's really ever been other than 1966, which we're still talking about. So I think the team did brilliantly.
Yes, I was a child in 1966 and we were coming back from holiday and I had my ear to my radio trying to pick up the signal to let my dad know what the score was.
Well, I didn't exist in 1966.
No, I'm sure you didn't.
that tells you the kind of time frame we're talking about here. So, I think...
it was a little while ago, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was a terrific achievement by those guys, particularly given the pressure of being on the home soil, which, we know from 2012 comes with equal pressure and benefit. You get the benefit of the fans, you get the pressure of having to kind of win on your own soil. But we got an incredibly talented bunch of players in a very competitive footballing world, and they'll be back in 2026 to see what they can do at the World Cup.
Absolutely. And what about poor old Southgate? I did feel a bit sorry for him, I must say.
I mean, personally, I think Gareth Southgate is an absolutely wonderful individual. I think his ability to transfer pressure away from the players, to deal with the nonsense that can surround the England team sometimes, I think he's an absolute giant of a character who, in his own calm, very personal way, is able to deal with all the major issues. And of course, it'd be a bit strange, wouldn't it, if everyone agreed with what the coach wanted to do. You've got 30, 40 million armchair fans who think that they're managers, and we all have an opinion and we all love football for that. But I think he conducted himself with grace, professionalism and success. So I think he's a remarkable guy.
Well, going back to you being a Paralympian, when you were born, you were diagnosed with glaucoma. So as a result of that, you've been blind all your life. Have you got any residual vision?
So when I was a kid, I had residual vision. I had the ability to see colours and shapes, but since about 7, 8 years old, that's completely gone. Although, rather strangely, I still do benefit from the fact that my visual cortex works. So the only thing that's changed is not the input of sight that makes my visual cortex work. It's the kind of surroundings, as you will be familiar with in terms of, sound and touch and smell and feel and atmospheric issues and spatial awareness, and all those things feed into that. So it's quite helpful having seen a little bit when I was a child, because my brain kind of still operates in that way, although it's not getting the input from my eyes.
Well, that's interesting. I've got light and dark perception myself, but I've never had any images being sent to my brain. So we probably, but of course, I am very aware of my surrounding environment in the way you've just described.
Yeah.
So how actually did you get into playing football?
So my parents were crazy about football. They're both brought up in Liverpool. My two boys, George and Edgar, are now crazy Liverpool fans as well as I am. So that's kind of carried on through the dynasty. But I used to play football with my dad on the drive, and we used to kick the ball around, and he was very aware, I think, of the fact that there wasn't any opportunity for me to play football as a kid, for my school or for a football club locally. The pathways just didn't exist. So he used to take me to play. And then I had a school teacher in School for the Blind in Wavertree in Liverpool, who actually saw the passion we have for football and put ball bearings inside a ball to make it rattle so that we could use it to play. And this was an absolute game changer for us, and we could hear where the ball was. And so we were able to play. And then I went to school in Worcester, where I played against, bigger, older kids. Some of whom could see, had partial sight, which meant that I learned how to control the football and use the football and become useful in the game. And one of the bizarre facts is that the person who used to organise weekday evening football at Worcester, at the school I was at, was Gary O'Donoghue, the BBC political reporter.
Yes.
So Gary used to organise all these games at 8 o'clock on a midweek night, and I just played thousands of hours and kind of honed the skills in that environment, really. But of course, it was never going anywhere. There was no pathway to do anything about it. And then in 1995, the powers that be across the world got together, created the format for blind football that everyone would use across the world. It was based on the game of futsal, which is largely played in Latin America and Spain and Portugal, which is this five-a-side game of football. Fully sighted goalkeepers, 4 outfield players, court 40 meters by 20 with boards down the side to ensure the ball can sort of rebound off them. That was it. We had a selection process. I got selected. Something I just thought, would never be taken forward, ended up being what I was doing. So it was just brilliant to get that first game under my belt. My first ever goal for England was a penalty, believe it or not. And
well done.
So English players historically have struggled scoring the penalties, although that seems to have changed now. But it was good that my first ever goal was a pen.
Yeah, the penalties do seem to be very nerve-wracking. I mean, even for someone like me that doesn't really follow football, I'm a bit of a tennis girl myself. But what was the biggest highlight of your footballing career, would you say? Was it that penalty or was it something else?
No, I'm going to be greedy and give you 2.
That's fine.
The first one was going to 100 goals with a hat-trick against Germany, which I think for any English footballer and then got substituted off, which gave me the opportunity to take the applause, and that was a beautiful moment. Went from 98 to 101 goals with that hat trick. And then also scoring the first goal in the Paralympics in London in front of 4,500 people around the court and millions watching around the world on telly.
Yeah.
And it was a reasonably good goal, beat 3 players, and then put it in the bottom corner with my right foot, which I normally use for standing on, not for kicking. So as a left-footed player, that was a goal I was really proud of. And just to get such a reaction to it, quite an amusing sight loss story here. I've never done this in my life, but I went and hugged the nearest player to me, as I thought, to celebrate the goal, and it ended up being the referee. So
I thought you were going to say somebody from the opposition.
No, so we both ended up on the front page of the Metro the following day, which was quite fun. But anything for publicity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're now the CEO of the British Paralympic Association, Paralympics GB, which we all. I mean, I do feel very excited about it. It's wonderful. Do you think things have really moved on from 2012?
Yeah. Look, I mean, firstly, it's a huge privilege to do this role. I've had a background not only in sport, but I spent 24 years in the banking industry, because when I was doing sport, people had that professional career as well as playing sport. So I was working 5 days a week, playing 6 days, training 6 days a week. And it was only in the latter years of my career that it became much more of a full-time occupation. So I've got that background. I've also got the charity background with my previous role as Chief Operating Officer at RNIB. So to bring those 3 things together into this amazing Paralympic space of bringing that sport, that charity experience, and that business knowledge into this space is just a huge privilege. And I get the opportunity to work with some amazing people in the organisation, some amazing athletes, and of course, the big moments coming up, isn't it, with Paris on the horizon, and
absolutely,
just really, really excited to be part of that. But I must say, as a disabled person myself and as a former Paralympian, I think it feels even more of a privilege, really, having been part of the amazing work this organisation does and got the support that I've had from that organisation during my time representing Great Britain. It's just superb to be in that role and to be able to ensure that our current athletes and future athletes get the same, if not better. The answer to your specific question about London 2012, I think, is a really interesting one, and I think it's a nuanced answer. I think what London 2012 did was get the public comfortable with the idea that disabled people can be elite sports people. I think hundreds of thousands of people walked into the park in London just kind of, wanting to see the park because perhaps they couldn't afford it or they couldn't get access to tickets for the Olympics. And what they found was an incredibly high level, exciting, enthralling sport, and sport at an elite level. And I remember being stood on the finish line for the Johnny Peacock race, the 100 meters, and 80,000 people shouting the name of a disabled athlete before, and having to be quiet and down before that 100 meters was quite something to behold, and something we never ever thought we would see. I think the challenge is, though, that what does that mean for every disabled person? What does that mean for every walk of life? What does that mean for education, employment, health, social inclusion, financial independence, all those things? Have we made that shift in behaviour and attitudes towards disability away from sport? And sadly, we haven't in any great way that I would like to have seen. So our mission at Paralympics GB is not just to fly the flag for Paralympians, but to absolutely fly the flag for every disabled person and ensure that the public understand the importance of changing attitudes and behaviours towards disabled people, to recognise that it's the way society is built that disables people, and to do something about it, and to ensure that they don't just believe that disabled people can be elite in sport, but can be elite in every part of life.
That's a huge challenge, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is. And it's one that can't be done alone. And I think what's really important to me is the amount of people that we've kind of got helping try and change this. I think collaboration among sports organisations, disability organisations, rights-based organisations, and working closely with those people who can change things, from from government to the education system, to the employment area, public bodies, private bodies. It's absolutely important that we work with all of these people to bring this change, because, as you say, it can't be done alone.
Well, it's certainly a lot of food for thought. But we can't ignore that the Paralympics are coming up in Paris very soon. What are your hopes and aims for this year's Games?
Well, I think the most important thing for me is that our athletes get the most incredible experience. For many, it will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to represent their country at the highest level. And our job is to make sure that they are best prepared to do so, that we create an environment that's a home-from-home environment, and it means they can produce their best at the time it matters, where it matters, on the day it matters. And then, of course, the second thing then is to use that gold dust and that currency we create to inspire the public, to put on a real show, but also to get people to understand, as we just discussed, that things are changing on the field of play. The success of the Paralympics is undoubted. It's the third biggest event in the world. It's an incredible experience for athletes and fans alike. However, we need to work really, really hard to ensure that same spirit and that same attitude and that same approach to disability spans wider society. So, our athletes are brilliant at speaking about this stuff. It's really important to them. They want to speak up about issues like this, and we're very keen for them to do so, because, they represent the very best of sporting talent, but they also live most of their lives outside of that sporting bubble as a disabled person.
Yeah. So really, you're really doing two tasks at the same time, aren't you? Getting success and also what we project about our disabilities to the general public. Two huge, big tasks.
100%. I mean, we have to create that environment for success to have the platform in the first place. And our athletes are so talented. They are working so hard. They're going to achieve some pretty amazing feats out in Paris. And I think one thing that might be interesting to your listeners is that what would get you a gold medal in 2012 probably wouldn't even get you on the podium in 2024. That's the speed at which the sport is progressing. So quite incredible.
Have you got any particular Paralympian athletes on your radar that you're really hoping for big success? Can you give us any little previews, people we should be watching, following?
I mean, I think as the CEO, it's probably a bit dangerous for me to get into individuals. I think. What do I enjoy as a fan? I always loved the wheelchair rugby. It was incredible to get the gold medal in Tokyo, and I was with those guys the other night, and they're super focused and ready to go battle. There are 6 top teams in the world, all of whom could achieve amazing things. So that's going to be amazing. I think from when I was in Rotterdam last year at the Europeans, I think watching the men's and women's wheelchair basketball was fantastic. The men won their competition and the women came second. So really, really interested to see how that goes. And then, we've got an amazing array of returning athletes, the likes of Johnny Peacock and Hannah Cockcroft on the track, Sarah Story on the bike. We've got some fantastic rowers, we've got some fantastic equestrian, but we also have a very young Paralympic para-table tennis player called Bly Toomey, who's 14 years old and is taking the world by storm. I'm really, really interested to see what she does in her singles and doubles. And also, of course, if we're talking about para-table tennis, you can't talk about para-table tennis without talking about Will Bailey. And it would be great to see how he gets on as well. But we're so proud of all 19 teams, all 19 sports who are going to be representing Great Britain out there. And we think they're best prepared. We've been kitting them out in the last few weeks with all their fantastic Adidas kit. And it's been a great experience, great to meet them all. And I can't wait to be part of something incredible in Paris.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just finally, David, we're hearing more about esports in the news now. I'm not really, I'm a bit too old, but there are lots of younger people that are really into it. When you look to the future of Paralympic sport, do you see anything there? How do you see the future of Paralympics?
I think it's a great question. I think what's top of mind at the moment for me in Paralympics is that, there's currently, it looks like we're going to have one additional sport funded for Los Angeles. And we have no additional sports at the Paris Games. And, what's really, really important, we've been able to work within the athlete cap, which is set by the International Olympic Committee. We've been able to kind of get much greater gender balance, but actual space for new sports and space for new categories of disability is very, very limited, and actually probably zero unless the organisers are prepared to fund it. So I think for me, it would be great if we could get that athlete cap increased so that we could introduce some new exciting sports, and we could perhaps, open up some of the existing sports to different categories of classification. But, when it comes to esports, I would say, why not? I think there's been a move within the Olympic movement recently to look at this space. And, from an accessibility point of view, I was involved. I know there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of work to try and make games and esports accessible to blind and partially sighted people. And so, my point on this is, why not? If it's competitive, if it requires you to be at your absolute best, to be the best in the world and to be challenged like that, then why not? But I think the more fundamental issue is how can we continue to allow the Paralympic movement to grow?
Yeah. So, David, finally, is there anything happening in the UK post Paris 2024 for anyone who's wanting to get involved in sports? They might feel inspired. How would they get involved in sport? Just your average Joe that's just following this and has a disability. What should they do?
Well, that's really important to us, actually. And, one of the campaigns that you'll see us talk about a lot is around the involvement of for disabled people in grassroots sports, and particularly school activities and school sport. 1 in 4 disabled children takes part in regular sport at school every week, which means that 3 in 4 don't, which is just utterly unacceptable. But there's 2 things you can do. So firstly, I would encourage people to go to our website, which is paralympics.org.uk. And there's 2 things there. Firstly, we will be having some fan zones throughout the games on screens and around the country, and a particular one in London. So take a look at that, and maybe if you can and you're in the locality, get down and enjoy some Paralympic sport. But the main way of doing it is to go to everybodymoves.org.uk. And what that enables you to do is to be able to filter by your location and your impairment. And that means you can then find local opportunities to do sport for clubs that we know are inclusive, that we know have inclusive provision. And our database on that is getting bigger and bigger every day. And we hope to see a huge uptick in interest across that platform as we run through the Paralympics.
Well, that's really helpful. Thanks very much. And thank you very much, Dave, for spending time with us on Reflections today. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Our thanks again to Dave Clarke, the CEO of Paralympics GB and the British Paralympic Association, for spending time with us today. And we wish the team all the very best and our prayers for this year's Paralympic Games in Paris. Time now for our thought for the week, which is all about finding the keys to happiness.
We all long to be happy in this world. What is the secret to gain happiness? A Gallup poll asking people to give their answers to this question revealed 5 pointers to being happy. Number 1 was believing in someone or something. We need a source of inspiration and strength outside ourselves that we can rely upon, especially when we're feeling down and vulnerable. Number 2, good relationships. This is so important when feeling lonely. To get on with neighbours, family and friends is such a blessing. Pride, self-centeredness and jealousy can often spoil that good relationship. Number 3 is meaningful work. Whether it's a 9-to-5 job or at home, we need interests and hobbies to fill our days and give us a purpose in life. Number 4 is something to look forward to. It may be a trivial item like a date to meet a friend, or a meal with a family member, or something special like a holiday. It lifts the spirit to anticipate a pleasure ahead. Number 5 is a spirit of gratitude. We have so much to be thankful for. When we see the world news, our hearts go out to those refugees and people in dreadful suffering in war zones. We are deeply grateful for comfortable homes, warmth, food, and a measure of good health. These 5 criteria could be applied to the Christian message we share. First, believing in someone. The psalmist says, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. That's from Psalm 46. The second heading, good relationships, reminds us of Jesus' words to love God and love our neighbour. We come to love God when we realise his great love for us in sending his Son to die for us, and we can respond to the one who loved me and gave himself for me. We can show kindness to those around us because we have received such grace from God, his loving kindness we don't deserve. Thirdly, meaningful work. As Christians, we're not floundering in the dark. We know we have a purpose to fulfil God's plan for our lives. Number 4, something to look forward to, a hope. The Easter message is so practical. As we read in 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 3 and 4, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that will never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you." Also in the Bible, we read of this hope likened to an anchor, giving us a firm hold in the storms of life, the anxieties, troubles, pain and disappointments. The 5th incentive for happiness is a spirit of gratitude. We can give thanks to a loving Heavenly Father who cares for us. So many things we take for granted. As we count our blessings, we get cheered up. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good.
Thank you to James Brookman for reading this week's thought, which gave us some things to ponder on our own searches for happiness. That's just about all we have time for on Reflections, but before we go, let me remind you about the opportunity to join us for the Torch Together Scarborough holiday in September. You'll be staying at Cobe Hill, a Victorian mansion steeped in history and set in 11 acres of stunning grounds nestled in the North York Moors National Park and Heritage Coast. There's still places available and also some funding to help people come through our Torch Bursary. For more details about this holiday and any other activities run by Torch Trust, you can give us a call on 01858 438 260 or visit the website torchtrust.org or email us on info@torchtrust.org. Until next time, from me, Marilyn Baker, God bless.
Reflections from Torch Trust.